Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 20, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Brooks, author Watchel. Brooks, where in the heck you calling in from?
West Hollywood, California.
How cool is
Above
that?
the Sunset Strip.
I'm in Venice, California. We're close. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
To be kind.
Oh my God, that is a beautiful statement. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I think what sticks with me the most is when I read it because it's interactive as opposed to just absorbing it through a screen.
Yeah,
When you read it, you're more involved. You're working with the information.
I like that. Did you grow up a reader because your parents were reading? As an example, they told you to read or on your own?
I've always read. My mother was a reader. My father, not so much, though my father loved history and a lot of the things that I got interested in. But I was, from the time I could read, I was always a reader.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Curiosity, security, wanting answers to the unknown, helping as the basis of a decision. Excuse me, I seem to be catching a frog in my throat.
No, that was good. Do you think, Brooks, this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our mythology was an attempt to answer questions. I'm sorry, I'm getting a very, uh, hoarse throat here. Hold on a second.
Go ahead. Take a breath. I'll just ask you another question and take your time. Make sure you feel soothed with your throat. Do
Hasn't bothered me all day, only because I'm on camera on a live broadcast.
do thoughts create emotions?
Definitely, I would think they are the basis of emotions. The brain triggers the heart feeds back to the brain, and the emotions are the result.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
Feel it.
feel it. Nice. Your observations of humans, just in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
We're more feeling beings,
Yeah.
and sometimes driven by feelings that aren't particularly admirable. Almost every problem we're having now could be solved intellectually, but emotionally, it prevents us.
Yeah. Brooks, can humans think without language?
Hmm. I know Orwell, when he wrote 1984 and talked about newspeak as a way to diminish human thought by the lack of words to express certain concepts. But I'm not sure. That's a very interesting concept. I mean, we can think in terms of fight or flight responses. We can think in terms of like or dislike. I mean, without language, gut level feelings, things like that. But higher functions, I don't know. I think we can also be very visual creatures. So perhaps without language, we can piece things together visually. I mean, did our early ancestors have language from the beginning? Did it develop? These are questions we'll probably never know, and I'm not actually sure. I would like to think we could.
Yeah, Brooks, you really get what we're after. I appreciate it. It was just casually talking about these ideas, and you really have some sort of ESP because you anticipated Chomsky, who's explored that. He said a language is not just words, it's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
That's a good question, especially for a writer. What do? I think we keep trying to find the language or find some other way to express that concept or ideas. Sometimes it's language, sometimes it's images, sometimes it's a combination of both. I mean, if you do a guttural scream or a cry or a laugh, you're expressing things without words.
Yeah.
And our imagery, going back to hieroglyphics and cuneiform and all that, found ways to express things almost pictorially.
Yep. So these are two questions from 1950s Alan Turing. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I think you're going to get a lot of different answers on that one because of the definition of what is the soul.
Yep.
In the religious sense of, the afterlife of a person that continues after the physical form is gone, or is it the essence of your persona, the essence of your totality? Those are very good questions. Does thinking go on after the soul? Well, some of the most religious people I've ever met, I'm not sure thinking goes on with the soul.
That's good. Yeah, you evoked Paul Krasner's great line. He says, "I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives." The second Turing question is, can machines think?
They can certainly calculate, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're on the cusp of having them actually sentient.
Yeah.
I would think that we're going to be seeing that kind of AI. I mean, it's already, and for the last half century, it's been part of our fiction.
Yeah.
And if it's in part of our fiction, it'll probably have a way of becoming part of our reality.
That's right. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I think in many cases they're intertwined, but on a basic level, I mean, we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the pursuit of happiness, I think, is a fundamental human desire to be happy. I think that's, if someone said, "What is your goal in life?" I've got a writer friend. When I teach a class, he's asked my class this, what do you want out of life? And it's a writing class. And most of them talk about their careers. And he says, no, my friend Stephen L. Sears would be a great guest. He says, no, what you want is to be happy. And you're hoping this will get you there. So I think what all of us basically want is to be happy.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I've taught, as students are coming in, I'll ask each one of them individually, what are you aspiring to be or do? Because it's like art and they might be a 3D animator or an editor or whatever. And one of my favorite answers was, what are you aspiring to do or be? And she says, to be a good human being. And that was so beautiful because it wasn't like so career oriented.
I think ultimately the greatest goal we can have is to, and it's a cliche, leave the place a little better than we found it.
Beautiful. Totally agree. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I don't really know. That's a good question. I think it's a handshake between those two concepts, really.
Yeah.
It's a chicken or the egg thing. You need both.
Yep. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
In some ways, speed of thought, because I can think myself to Alpha Centauri in a second, but even at the speed of light, it would take a long time to get there. Of course, I'm not physically there, but mentally, I've arrived.
Hey, Brooks, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right.
I like
There's
a gold star.
Yeah, there's a poet, Audre Lorde, says, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
A very old one. Listening.
Oh my God, that's one of my favorites. I love that word. Thank you. What new toy do you suggest?
You mean technology? Or
Well, you can put the word toy into the context you want. And in fact, all these questions, you put them into the context you want. So I just was asking the tool question for 30 years, and then someone said, well, I like toys better. So I thought I'd throw in what, to like counter tool and toy. I mean, they're similar in a lot of ways, but
what toy do I want? I'd have to give that some thought, because I think listening, compassion, empathy.
yeah. I love all those. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Am I going to get to sleep or not?
So Brooks, Marshall McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. And by artists, I mean filmmakers, producers, writers, painters, musicians. The artists are the antenna of the race, and they're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think because sometimes the answers are hard. Sometimes the questions are hard. Sometimes those in power, or just people like all of us living their lives, want to sweep them under the mat and not really think about them.
Yeah.
And we as a race have a way of not dealing with problems until they become a crisis. I mean, right now, Europe is suffering a massive heat wave, almost unparalleled in its recorded history. The people would study these things warned us 20, 30 years ago this kind of thing would happen, but it was inconvenient to deal with it. It called for hard choices we weren't prepared to make. If this keeps up or gets worse, then we'll probably take steps, maybe serious steps, to try to mitigate it, but we could have done that decades ago and didn't.
Yeah.
We're doing it now. So I think, when you have artists, writers, whatever that whose work have a warning, what was the old joke about all of the artists in 1930s Berlin, how they stopped World War II? Well, of course they didn't, because the arts can ask a question, but you have to have enough people wanting to address the question and do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think there have been cases. I mean, individual things going back where arts have made a difference. I mean, Common Sense was a help with the American Revolution. I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang help with prison reform in the South. I mean, there have been things where some things have been exposed, but they tend to be not such things that demand such vast sacrifice or change to a system or a way of life, that they can be dealt with easier. Because I'm not a scientist, and I certainly don't have the answers, but climate change is something that's probably going to take massive investment, changes on way of life, a lot of people are going to lose money and power. But those are not easy things to accomplish, even in the face of an existential threat.
Yeah. Excellent, Brooks. Because one thing, just sort of jokingly, again, you evoked, and what you said was seriously, got to me seriously, but they asked John Cage a question once, and he goes, "That's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer."
There is sometimes great wisdom in brevity.
Yeah. But do artists have moral obligation?
Mm. No, but they should.
Wow, that's heavy. Yeah, I've just added that question in.
Can you hold on while I get a little more water?
Sure, no problem.
I will be brief.
Yes. So we're honored to be speaking with Brooks Watchel today. I first encountered him on the Venice Boardwalk, and we will talk about his dealings there. He has since been an Emmy-winning writer. So, Brooks, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I don't think I'm afraid of either.
Beautiful.
I think new ideas come from old ideas. And good heavens, in television and film, that's practically a religion.
Yeah.
I mean, I bring this up with my class. Watch classic movies. They have something to tell and teach, and they can be a springboard for a story. I mean, a classic. You remember? Were you a Star Trek original series fan?
Yeah.
Remember the episode "Balance of Terror"?
Uh-huh.
Introduced the Romulans. And
Yeah.
you know where that episode came from. That writer said, "We're going to do the enemy below in space." Almost the same beats, almost some of the same dialogue, the same character relationships. A 1958 film with Robert Mitchum and Kurt Jurgens said, "Let's do it in space. The U-boat will be a Romulan ship with an invisibility cloak. The destroyer will be the Enterprise. It's a duel between two captains." He made a sale because he knew an old movie.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It's
or
interesting.
Another one, if I can go in a slight.
Oh, no, you can. But it's interesting because what I see is what Harold Bloom talked about, the anxiety of influence. It's you absorb your influence and then you abandon them rather than being, it's more like being rooted than retro.
The difference between borrowing and stealing.
Yeah. Very good.
You can take two things that seem. I mean, I teach a writing class at UCLA, and when we talk about structure, I mention. How many of you remember the movie Independence Day?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give you in just a few sentences the basic structure of the first 2/3 of that movie. Okay. Aliens arrive. We're not sure of their intentions. A greeting party goes out to talk to them. They're obliterated. We know they're hostile. We have a huge battle, but find our weapons can't penetrate the aliens' force field. Humanity's in retreat. In desperation, we nuke them, and even atomic weapons can't penetrate their force field. It looks like we're doomed. That about the first 2/3 in broad strokes of Independence Day?
Yeah.
No, it's the broad strokes of the 1953 movie, The War of the Worlds.
Yes.
It's the same story.
Yeah.
It's just, structure. And they were obviously influenced. They took that structure, they made a different story, gave a different twist, and had a gigantic hit. I guess what I'm trying to say is new ideas can generate from old ideas. They don't always generate in a vacuum or from other things in life. Sometimes you'll see something and say, what if this story went this way or that way? Or this other character, what if we followed him? How did this story affect that guy that's in the background? That's a minor character. So, there's all kinds of ways to extrapolate. My students are also amazed when, I say, you all know the Star Wars theme, right? And I play them, okay, I'm going to play you a few minutes from a the score to a 1940 movie called King's Row, scored by Erich Wolfgang Korngold. And they're amazed because it's practically the same melody, because Williams was influenced by Korngold.
Yeah.
I mean, Korngold did films like The Adventures of Robin Hood, The Seahawk. That's the kind of score that was called for. He went back to the source.
Yeah.
And he admits it. I mean, he didn't borrow; he stole.
Yeah.
In the good way.
Yeah.
And so it's.
Well, we're going to get into that. That's T.S. Eliot said, "The mature poet steals, the immature poet imitates." But
Right.
a few more philosophical questions, just in your background. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Boy, oh boy. My first snowstorm, and with my brother in our little snowsuits. Probably we were 3 and 1 or 2 and 4 or something like that. Well, it must have been earlier. Probably early memories when I think we were living in New York. My father was in the Navy, so we moved around a great deal. And I have vague memories of New York. And I was probably 2 or 3, maybe.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Both. Depends on the memory.
Exactly. Tell me someone within your immediate family and then someone outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
I'd have to think more about that. I mean, my parents certainly, and talk about immediate family because all of us are influenced by our parents.
Well, what'd you mainly get from your mom and your dad? What would you just say briefly off the top of your head?
I think you get a set of values,
Yeah.
not only from what they tell you, but how they react and what they do. With the Navy, a picture to a bigger world, more awareness of world affairs because that affected the profession.
Well, that's good. Now, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you early on, what was the impact?
I want to think about that a little more because there have been so
Okay.
many. There have been so many. I don't know if I could just put it down to one. There have been quite a few.
That's fine.
And it depends on where and when you meet them in life, And
Yeah.
was the impact big then, but did it linger? Or, it's, I think
I
I'd
understand.
cogitate on that a bit.
That's fine. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, not really. I mean, part Jewish, but we were never religious.
Do you pray?
When I'm frightened enough.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
You're going up.
That's brevity, dude. You're a good writer. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
That is a very interesting question because there's an old cliche that the villain is the hero of his own story or her own story. They don't think they're evil.
Yes.
And I've got a brilliant writer friend, and who's also the editor of my book, named Sherry Goodharts. And she comes to my class and she does kind of a matrix with the student on the motivations of the hero and villain. And what it usually boils down to is the hero wants freedom and the villain wants control.
Yes. That is really good.
She'd be a marvelous guest.
Yes, I really want to interview her. The villain wants what? The hero wants freedom. The villain wants control. That is beautiful. I can use That is gorgeous. Thank you. I mean, gorgeous in a way. So the real question here I'm asking, Brooks, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set up with a few modern thinkers' thought. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, Brooks, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, philosophically or emotionally, we do have it in us to empower other people by whatever control we give them or the effect we let them have on us. Now, that's not to say that they can't be empowered in a physical or financial way over us. I mean, clearly, for instance, if you get in trouble with the IRS, they have a power over you. Whether they're an enemy or not depends, I guess, on how you look at it. But we do end up in situations where there are people that wish us ill. I mean, often it's not specific, we wish you personally ill, but you're in the way of something we want to accomplish.
It's good. I like that. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin. About 100 years ago, he ran Volta Cinema there. And he basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Life is messy and drama is structured.
That is good.
We'd like life to have order. It doesn't. Drama does. It's an artificial construct, and we can create it with a beginning, middle, and end. Hopefully an outcome that's emotionally satisfying. And life isn't neatly wrapped up like that.
Yeah. So, Brooks, what first attracted you, like the tipping point to become a writer? What did you grow up reading and you go, oh, I can do that? Or just some sort of walk us through that briefly.
I want to be a writer. I want to be a storyteller. And I really, like most of us wanted to direct, and writing was a way to get there. My career path had far more writing than directing. And, basically I'm a storyteller, whether it's with pictures or words or a combination of them. I like to tell stories. I always have. I did student films when I was in high school, college. I like to tell stories.
Yeah. Well, what's the difference between storytelling and narrative? And I'll just set it up with Hollis Frampton, the great experimental filmmaker, said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. How do you differentiate between storytelling and narrative?
It's almost a question of like the difference between story and plot.
Yeah.
Story is what it's about. Plot is the mechanics that get you there.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, we're going to get back into that. Now, a screenwriting teacher told me years ago, a great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. A great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a script?
To preface that by saying a lot of my career was in television, where you're servicing a show. You have to be a chameleon, and you have to fit into the style and tone of that show. a professional television writer is a bit of a chameleon, because you're working in a lot of universes and you have to fit into that universe. You have to bring a lot of yourself to it, but not so much to where it doesn't feel like it fits into the universe of that show. So that's on a professional level. You want to tell the story the best you can and bring your own emotion and your own feelings and your own knowledge and experiences to it, but it has to be within the constraints of filling that show. I joke to my students, if you're writing Clifford the Big Red Dog, you're not going to sell a story where he gets rabies.
Right.
You have to fit into that universe.
Yeah.
And a lot of my career, I wrote lots and lots of television, a lot of it animation, some documentaries and live action. You have to do that with when you're doing original work, then you've got more leeway.
But let's put that in the context of original work. When you're writing an original screenplay, what role does intention play in that creative process for you?
Well, that is the theme of your story. And the theme is always what drives the story. Everything works toward that if all the cylinders are firing. And then you work out the mechanics of the plot. So intention is a great deal. And it also depends on the kind of story. My first novel, Lady Sherlock, Circle of the Smiling Dead, there's a plug for you, available on Amazon. It deals with a wonderful emancipated female detective in turn of the century England and the politics of the era. So there's a lot of themes that go in the book. But on the other hand, it's she's an ongoing character. So you can't kill her off or have too great a change at the end of the first story, because you want to set up for the second story. I'm getting into some of the technicalities of writing here, but it's the difference between a standalone story and a series.
Yeah.
If James Bond stays James Bond through the series, and he grows a little, he changes a little, but he's essentially James Bond. Sherlock Holmes, the same. So you deal with that and you find great adventures for them, and they have emotional growth. But it's different because most standalone stories deal at the pivot point of a character where they're going to make a decision that's going to alter the rest of their lives. You're at that tipping point. Yeah. And the story centers around that. Is good example for the class. 2 stories, very different plots, but the same story. A Christmas Carol and Casablanca.
Yeah.
They both deal with characters that have been wounded and are alienated and withdrawn from society. And by the end of each story, they've healed to some degree and have reintegrated with society. Now, the plots are very different, the characters are very different, but the essence, the themes are very similar.
Yeah.
Or is this getting too arcane?
No, this is beautiful. I appreciate what you're talking and teaching me. In books, this standalone idea, this original idea, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. When you're writing an original standalone piece, whether it's a book or a script, how much do you think of your audience, your reader, your viewer?
Most of us will say we write to make ourselves happy and excited. One of the cardinal rules is you can't be boring. And so, I try to keep it fun and, what's a good twist? What's that? And I suppose you're thinking of your readers and your audience to some degree, but you really have to service what you think is a good story and a good character and what makes it fun and exciting for you. And that's true with television too. You can pitch to a show that you think is just inane, ill-conceived, stupid. But when you get the job, you find something in there that excites you.
Yeah. No, it's interesting what you said because I worked for Frank Zappa for 10 years, and he would say, I write this music for myself, and if other people like it, great. But I know, and I think he over romanticized that process. And I'm not criticizing him, but he knew if he hit this note or said this word, people would buy his music and then he could make more music. And so, it's just this whole idea of how much that audience is in your creative process. Another thing McLuhan says that I'm curious about in your regard is everything we invent extends some humanness, or you would say human sensorium. So, like knife and fork extend our teeth, clothing extends our skin. Even like the projector shutter is an extension of our eyelid. Even like a non-tangible religion or philosophy extends maybe consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness is extended with the writing utensil for you?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's simply a means to get things recorded. I used to write longhand. I felt, as when I was much younger, that it was slower. It gave me more time to think. Then I typed. Then when computers came along, I got computers. Of course, professionally, with the rise of computers, deadlines started to be tighter. So you just had to use them. Now, if I'm working on my own stuff, it's simply a way to get to record, to get from you to a medium that is permanent.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about computers, of course, is it's easy to change. You can look at it. If you don't like it, it's easy to go back and change it. And you look at manuscripts, from classic authors and the galley proofs, and they're scribbled all over the place. And with computers, you go change it, you print it out, and it's perfectly clean, perfect piece of it. It's just there. So
Yeah.
I think it gives you more freedom to say, I could do better than that. Let me go back and change that. I can make that better.
Nice. Well, that brings up this idea of aesthetics, and I call it taste. My friend who taught me in music the 3 T's: technique, theory, and taste. So technique, yeah, as a writer, musician, you can learn how to do it. Theory, struck. Taste. How does one acquire taste? You
Taste?
gravitate taste, like you gravitated towards Sherlock Holmes, your lady Sherlock. You gravitated towards various, genres. And you've gravitated towards using examples to your class. You use Star Trek. How does one acquire taste, whether it's in film or books?
I suppose what you're exposed to,
Yeah.
what your early interests are. And of course, that can change throughout your life depending on if you're exposed to something and it suddenly appeals to you. I don't know. I suppose every person would have a different answer.
No, it's interesting. That's the answer I get the most is exposure. But it's sort of like this thing about your gut feeling when the word taste comes in. But I'm curious, this is similar. What McLuhan says is there's no such thing as a good or a bad movie. It's a good or a bad viewing experience. I'm not saying that's good, right or wrong. I'm just asking you, what's your feelings on that?
I've seen some terrible films that I found some interesting things in parts of them. I think it's just what appeals to you, and art is tremendously subjective.
Yeah.
There are people who adore modern art and dismiss the classics, or like it all, or like one or the other. It's just tremendously subjective. You know, there are people who want to see every Hallmark movie ever made, and others that would run for the hills if one shows up on their screen. It's a matter of, what one wants, what one likes, what appeals to one.
Yeah. I talked with Michael Apted about 40 years ago. I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but in 1980, it really started to flourish with MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. What Michael Apted told me was because we've learned to take in information faster. And I asked this with a bias. Can humans literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think we can. We seem to. Modern films, they seem to be in shorthand. There's a lot more information coming. Whether we absorb it deeper, whether it makes as big an impact, whether we absorb it and really mull it over or give it more depth of thought, I don't know. Fast cutting, actually, probably even going back to Eisenstein. He did montage. I had a teacher called Slavko Vorkapich who did montages in the 30s. And John Hoffman, his protege. You look at some of that stuff; it's very, very fast. Look at some of the cutting in the earthquake sequence from the film San Francisco in the 30s. It's as fast as any music video. I think music videos tend to cut fast because the music had a certain dynamic beat, and they were cutting to the rhythm of the music, and it had a fast beat. If you were cutting to the Blue Danube, you probably would want a slower rhythm. The form, the form dictates it.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do we absorb information faster? Well, I think we tend to be less explicit. We've seen, in terms of movies and TV, we have seen so much that a lot of the conventions are second nature to us and don't need to be as explicit.
The hidden question here really is, Brooks, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
Well, I guess that depends on the person. Some of the ladies I know do it brilliantly. When I try it, I'm not sure brilliant would be the correct adjective.
I'm glad you brought up women because did you know there's an amazing movie, Be Natural, the story of Alice G Blanchet. So she's this woman who helped invent narrative in cinema when Méliès, she was a peer of George Méliès. And it's a beautiful film because most people don't know her. She got blackballed out of film history. But the astounding thing is, you bringing up Eisenstein. Eisenstein saw one of her films when he was 8 years old, and he literally, you can do it. He ripped off the scene, the Potemkin Odessa step scene from her, or influenced by or whatever. But to think that is amazing, and having studied film history like you for over 50 years, it's like, why didn't I know this?
Well, unfortunately, and not just in film, but women tended to not get the credit that they deserved for the accomplishments they did.
Yeah.
So often. And it's still ongoing. It's unfair, and it's, women are half the human race, and that half should be invited in to contribute their brains, their intelligence, their brawn, their courage, because we'd be a lot further along as a species and a civilization with all of us working, and not half of us not given an equal seat at the table.
Equal seat, beautiful words. And so what's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
You could give an answer about emotion or this or that, but A lot of it depends on individuals. I mean, women on the whole can be more empathetic and kinder. But on the other hand, it's a matter of individuals. You find a lot of these traits in both genders, and it's a matter of what's emphasized in each individual.
Yeah.
I mean, physical aside. I know brilliant women. I've been influenced by them. I've learned tremendous amounts from them. I've been inspired by them. I think they really need to be more encouraged.
Why do women live longer than men?
I suppose it's a combination of biology and intelligence.
Yeah.
They'll go to the doctor more often. They don't do quite as many stupid things. Most of them, I mean, you know, there's women that will do some of the same dumb daredevil stunts that get men killed. But I think biologically they probably are just built to last longer.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't really know. I'm not my line of country.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's what I'm after, your hunch. Like Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch. And in that regard, what's your feelings? What was the motive of the cave artist?
Maybe a combination of things. A desire to create, a desire to record.
Yeah.
We don't know who that artist was. We never will. But we do know, thanks to the paintings that artists did, a little bit of what their existence was like.
Yeah. Two of my film heroes have similar mantras. Like George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. It's basically a stupid question. I know it's both and it depends, but just your feelings, Brooks. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, environments are dominant?
You mean the art we create?
Yeah, the artists themselves, the act of art making. Is it more self-expression? I know it's both. Is it more self-expression or more the artist is a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, environments are dominant?
You know, it depends on how you look at the technology, because they are mediums for artists to work in and to find ways to create and express. And as the technologies evolve, you know, you jump into those tools. An artist in the 17th century could work in paint and pencil and sculpture. An artist in the 20th century could work in photography, film, recording. It's a matter of, you know, what you have to work with and what you do with it and how you use it to express, record, create. And I think so also on a basic level, to put bread on the table.
Exactly. It's well put. And so can art making be egoless?
No.
Was Freud right?
I don't think we have enough time to debate that one.
I asked a big shot Hollywood director that at a screening at USC once, and he says, that's beyond my pay grade. And his film was all about Freud, and he eventually did answer it. But I thought what's more important, Brooks, conviction or compromise?
They're both needed.
Yeah.
Democracy is the art of compromise. Relationships are the art of compromise. I think you compromise to the point of your conviction.
Yeah. It's good. You've accomplished a lot in your life, Brooks. Nate, put these in an order on what played the biggest role, second and third. Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the most, second and third role in your accomplishments?
Luck, skill, and ambition. You know, that's not a stack, it's a circle.
It's a circle. Wow.
And whatever spoke comes up at the right time. You know the old thing, you can have it cheap, fast, or good, but you can't have all three.
You can have a cheap what?
You can have a job cheap, fast, or good. Pick any two. You can't have all three. Maybe
Can't.
it's a little bit, skill, ambition, and luck. You know, you have to have certain things going. If you have luck and skill, you'll get it. If you have ambition and skill but no luck, if you have luck and ambition but no skill, it's a circle.
I like this a lot. No one's ever approached it this way. One person told me, well, I don't like your three choices. I'm going to add the fourth one, necessity. But let me tell you the history books of this question. It used to be, is ambition based more on fear or joy? So how would you answer that one?
I think that's right foot, left foot.
So I asked that for about 25 years. And then I read Friedkin, William Friedkin's
Yeah.
book. He's an articulate filmmaker, and I like to hear him talk about the art of filmmaking. And he said, in Hollywood, luck and skill have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
Well, in that sense, yes, ambition will keep you at it.
Yeah.
And because for most of us, I mean, there's always these overnight wonders, but the cliche is the overnight wonder after 20 years of working.
Yeah.
The overnight success. For most people, to make it in this business demands a long haul and a lot of rejection. So the ambition and belief that you can do it is what keeps you in the game. If you can find a way to keep a roof over your head and food on the table while you're doing it, while you're trying to get there.
Yeah. Really well put, Brooks. This is fun, and I really appreciate your time. In that regard, you've had a good career, great career, whatever. You tell me one major element that stayed the same throughout your career and one major element that's changed.
The desire to tell stories has stayed the same. The ambition has changed.
Wow. Can you talk about that? What is it in you yourself that desire has stayed alive? Is it how your parents raised you, on your own? How do you explain that desire to stay consistently going?
I'm not sure. I think it's just telling story. I like to be creative. I like to do things. I don't just want to sit around. Well, many times I do just want to sit around. But on the whole, I like to have a project going that fires my imagination, lets me do research, lets me think creatively, lets me plot, lets me enjoy storytelling. It was film, it was television, now it's novels. I've been a storyteller as long as I can remember wanting to do that. I mean, back in the, school, elementary school, when we'd have to write reports, many times I'd turn mine into fiction. I'd give a background story to the report. It was just something I always did. I always loved movies. I always loved television. I always loved entertainment. stories, character, and it just always intrigued me. I
Yeah.
think the first film I probably really remember that made a big influence on me, and I saw it in its original release because I'm that old, was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, many, many, many years later, as you know, I got a model of the novelist from that film. And people of my generation in the business that came over and saw it admitted that was the film I saw as a kid that made me want to get into movies.
Yeah.
So I must not have been alone in that particular regard.
Very good. And then your second. Go ahead.
As for the ambition, I did, decades in television and all of that. And eventually I decided with whatever creative time I have left, I wanted to write to make myself happy, not to make other people happy, not to have to deal with inane notes and, other people's visions. I don't make as much money, but, when you reach a certain point, I think in life, you start to look ahead and realize it's not infinite. What do I want to do with it?
Yeah. You mean like pursuing writing Lady Sherlock? That was more a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had done that. It actually had a genesis. I did it as a script many, many years ago. Got me a lot of work, but never sold. And I said, this is a really fun character and a great concept, and it ought to be out there. And I really enjoy working on it. So I thought I'd turn it into a novel. And of course, I said, that'll be easy. I'll add a he said, she said, if you, pump up the description. Ended up with a novelized screenplay, and then working with my editor, Sherry Goodhart's. 15 drafts later, it was actually a novel. Quite a learning curve because I'd never written a novel before, and it is a different form. I mean, there's many things in writing that are the same: structure, pace, dialogue, character, but it has its own differences. So it was fun learning a new medium, and turned out, I think, pretty well. Got some good reviews, and now I'm working on the second. She's editing the second book. It's illustrated too, so I got to use my graphic talents to illustrate it in the style of the old Sherlock Holmes stories.
Oh, that's beautiful. And so just staying on Sherlock for a second, I was a big fan in the 70s. I would show at my film series Billy Wilder's version of Sherlock Holmes, and there's the classic older ones, and there's been done throughout. What couple Sherlock Holmes film adaptations have made an impact on you, or you were fond of?
There's years ago. I mean, there's several years ago when I was much younger. I saw the Basil Rathbone Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. It was the first Rathbone film I'd seen of him as Holmes, and it was one of only two that was done in period. And I really liked it. And I remember how disappointed I was when I saw the next Universal film, and it's set in the 1940s. And then the Billy Wilder film you mentioned is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, everything about it. I wish the film had not been so truncated, because, as you know, about an hour was cut out of it. And it's just brilliant. It's a Victorian Valentine to Sherlock Holmes, and the Nicholas Roja score, the art direction, the performances, the wit. I mean, it's just a brilliant film. And then, of course, the Jeremy Brett series, which actually brought Conan Doyle stories to life so brilliantly and authentically. Those were probably my favorite. I always loved the era. I mean, as long as I can remember, I love that era, not just Sherlock Holmes, but the era. And I love history. So it was a way to combine it all. The springboard for the Lady Sherlock stories, both the first one, the one I've written, is real history. Something in the politics or something that happened in the time that springboards the story. The story's fictional, but the background and the era and what drives some of the plot is actual.
That was beautiful. Can we just stay on Billy Wilder for a second? Because I'm so fond of his aphorisms, as well as being such an amazing filmmaker and writer. I was wondering your take on this. He says, make the subtleties obvious. What does that mean to you, or what do you think he's saying there?
Don't make them so subtle that nobody gets them.
So simple. You're good. The other one I love is he says, I just hope the audience likes my film as much as they like the popcorn.
No, that is a tough goal for any filmmaker. He also said, and I tell my students this, build, 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 build till the end and then get out. Don't hang around.
That's what Billy said?
Yeah.
Do you know
there's so many great stories about
Yeah.
Billy Wilder. I mean, the one where he has an interview with some young person whose cell phones had just come out and the person's on the phone all the time, and Wilder's sitting in the office and the guy's not giving him the respect this genius deserves, and Wilder just excuses himself and says, why don't I come back later when you're not so busy and maybe when you're a little older?
Oh, this is good. Yeah, you might know my friend Burr Middleton. Anyways, he had some funny Billy Wilder stories because sadly I haven't watched every documentary or read every book on Billy, but we could do a whole salon on that. But I did want to go back to something you said in it, evoked the poet Auden. Auden said, the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. So, yeah, I know it does both, but I love the word mystery that, we might, like Bertolt Brecht, he hang out right here in Pacific Palisades. He says, I don't want art that puts me in a trance. I want art that activates me. But something that puts you in a trance might lead to you being activated. So yeah, go ahead.
There's no rule. There's no one way. You're talking about a universe of different kinds of arts. I mean, it's the difference you get listening to a Brahms lullaby or Frank Zappa. I mean, they're both beautiful music, but they're completely different and have different emotional responses. It's so infinite, and it runs the gamut from one to the other, and I don't think you can pigeonhole it.
Yeah.
Does it work or doesn't it? Do you enjoy it or not?
Yeah.
Make you think or doesn't it? I mean, does it elicit a response at all? Maybe that should be it. Does it elicit a response?
Yeah, because that's the cliche. You get up in front of your film screening and you go, you're the director's here and they're going to do a Q&A and I hope you enjoy the film. I'm like, don't tell me how to feel. I like when they go, I hope you react and don't fall asleep. But it's funny. I have to sidetrack again for a second. Did you ever have any encounters with Frank Zappa?
No, I never did.
How about Korla Pandit? You ever encounter him?
Yes, I did. I had some friends who had a house in Toluca Lake with pipe organs. They had a Wurlitzer in a home theater. There was a wonderful theater, 235 and 216 ArcLight projectors. And then they had a classical organ upstairs. And this was decades and decades and decades ago. And Korla Pandit came and played the organ.
Yeah. Now, do you know he disguised himself as an Indian? He was real. But did you know then? Did people know then, or was that?
I didn't know then. I didn't know. I mean, I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I didn't know then. I barely knew who he was, but I enjoyed the music. But later I found out. I mean, there's a lot of things you find out later.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, back when I met Korla Pandit and I was 16 or 17 years old, there was no internet.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to find out information like that, it would probably be by rumor.
Right.
So, I mean,
the guy who played organ at the silent movie theater for like 60 years behind movies, Bob Mitchell, I think his name was. I asked him, did you know Korla Pandit? He goes, yeah. I said, did you know he was black? And he goes, yeah, some of us knew. So it was interesting, but overall he wasn't. But two more really quickly. I'm curious. Lord Buckley, did you ever encounter him?
Only in television, in film, just recordings, never in person.
And how about Ernie Kovacs?
Oh, I never met him. Of course, I mean, he passed away when I was just, probably not even a teen, but I loved the show. I'd catch him on
Yeah.
TV whenever I could.
Yeah. Okay,
And
sorry for the divert, but this is fun. Back to poetry for a second. What's the function of poetry?
there is no one function of poetry. You know, what is poetry? It's everything from Robert Service to, you know, a modern poet who disdains rhyme. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everything and anything in between.
Yeah. Well, T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Hopefully, I can navigate the intricacies of English.
What form? It's more so metaphorically. What form is your inner consciousness in?
You know, I'm not sure how I could even answer that. That's a damn good question. My inner consciousness, I suppose it's you know, between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge.
Oh, that is
That's
Brooks.
Rod Serling. Thank you.
That's who?
Rod Serling.
That's Rod Serling. Could you say it
one
one
more
more?
Twilight Zone, but
Could you say? Could you say it one more time? Between the what?
The pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge or wisdom. I forget. You know, it's the opening of the Twilight Zone. Whatever season. Yes, well, you know, that's Rod Serling. I wish I could take credit for that, but a better writer than I.
But the beauty is that you reference him and you can pull that out, because I love Rod, but I don't have that quote in the Rolodex of my mind. I've got to tell you, this great filmmaker in New York, experimental filmmaker Abigail Chowley, says, what language is your inner consciousness, or what language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew.
That's probably the most honest answer.
That is what was one of my favorites. One more poetry question. I'm just curious. Leo Bersani, a lit crit, he just died. He did a study of Mallarmé, the symbolist poet. He said the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. And I'm curious if that somewhat could apply to screenwriting or book writing. The very crisis which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic compositions. Any thoughts?
There's so many ways to approach that. The crisis of the writing. I mean, that's, you know, the fear, the cliche that writers will do almost anything to avoid having to sit down and write. That's why we have deadlines, and that's why when you're doing spec work, it's often harder, at least for me.
Yeah.
But eventually the story, you know, if that's what you do, the story comes out. And then it gets refined and refined, because as my old friend Frank Kowalski used to say, the secret of good writing is rewriting. Pardon me, not Frank Kowalski. That was David. Oh, God. You see, when you reach a certain age, names seem to flutter out like butterflies from your memory. I'm a producer I work with, but the secret of good writing is rewriting. Maybe that was Frank Kowalski. Or write, W-R-I, you know, W-R-I-T-E, you know.
Yeah.
And rewrite, and then R-I-G-H-T.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy, I interviewed this guy with all these same questions who wrote that first, I can't think of his name right now, but he wrote the first Tom Cruise big film, and he teaches at USC screenwriting, and he says it's all about rewriting, or that he emphasizes the importance of rewriting. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
There's different kinds of rewriting. There's rewriting because you know you can make it better, and then there's rewriting because you're getting notes from everyone and their uncle.
Yeah.
My agent's husband, who was a retired, wonderful TV writer named Cheryl Hendricks, going back to Combat and shows like that, had a quote that I love. It says, "The first draft belongs to the writer. After that, your job is to save the script."
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I'm doing novels. I mean, I enjoy it more. And when I get notes from my editor, they're smart, and I don't have to take them. If I'm smart, I usually do, but I don't have to take them like from the producers, from the
Yeah.
story editors, from the centrists, from occasionally a sponsor. The notes that you wonder how some of these folks can sign a check, let alone write a note. Of course, signing the check is the one thing you look forward to them actually doing.
No, I like studying. Harold Lloyd invented test screening. Basically, they credit him.
Him I
But
met.
yeah, and in this great moment was in the film Spinal Tap, the spoof of the rock band. Harry Shearer told us once they did a test screening and someone wrote on the card, "Good film, but you should have got a better rock band."
Oh, cosmically missing the point.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I wish for them.
It's good. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
A weakness I turned into a strength. Well, I think for almost any writer, daydreaming.
It's good. That is beautiful, daydreaming. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's reminds me of George Carlin. He said, "Whatever happened to letting kids stare out the window?" Johnny, you got to go to soccer now. You got to go. La, la, la.
Yeah, it appears kids are much too structured, and also, at least in the cities, too much fear hitting them. You can't play outside because someone may kidnap you.
Yeah.
I guess you might have had the same experience. Our folks let us go play outside.
Hello.
It's just just be home. Don't go further than this street, and just be home by dark. And,
Yeah.
And just come home and don't have the police bring you back.
Well, I forgot to you also evoked something a couple statements back about memory. And I want to tell you, having studied James Joyce for many years, he has a great line, remember to forget. But
Memory, my memory isn't what it used to be, and it never was.
yeah, that's McLuhan. The future ain't what it used to be. But what they say is if you look at your keys and you don't know what they're for, then you maybe have problems. But if you forget where your keys are, that's normal.
Oh yeah.
But back to daydreaming, Brooks, this is interesting because McLuhan probed the book Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, saying artists dream awake. And it's not to be elitist. Everybody creates these scenarios in the middle of the night while they're sleeping. They dream. But artists also dream awake. So have dreams played a role in your creative process?
You mean the actual dreams you have when sleeping?
Well, you put in the context you want, however you want.
Maybe a little. Once in a while, I'll dream something that'll work its way into a story or a concept, but often it's more work than that. It's asking the what if. It's it's like a sculpture who starts with a piece of a block of marble, and the art is somewhere inside it, and you have to find that.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
It gets you started, but it can't sustain.
It can't sustain. That's good.
And also, if you're writing something out of anger, and I will put that as a personal anger, a revenge kind of story, sometimes you lose your objectivity. I mean, if you're angry because, well, maybe Neville Shute was angry because he thought they were going to blow up the world and he wrote On the Beach, that's a different kind of anger.
Yeah.
If you're angry because, X person did this rotten thing to you and you're going to write a story as revenge, unless you can overcome that initial thing and make it a real story, it's probably going to be limited, not that good.
Brooks, there's a saying that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So just this idea, I'm not saying you, Brooks, but one creates what one resists. You create what you resist. Any thoughts on that idea?
You create what you resist. Again, I think, I don't think it's ever that clean. You create what you resist, you create what you desire, you create what you would like, you create what would be fun, you create what you wish you could do, or a place you could be, or people you could know. I think it's all of that.
Yeah. This has been really fun, Brooks, and we got about 15 more minutes. And I'm curious, I first encountered you 42 years ago, and it was truly fun. It was one of the fun things. I would go down to Venice Boardwalk, and right there at the corner of like downtown Venice Boardwalk, you had a little table and a display of just sort of showing off a pipe. And I'm curious, what motivated you to do this? Did you see people doing this kind of thing on the street? And then you had a long run there, and was it successful?
Yes, it kept me employed. It kept food on the table and a roof over my head till the writing was paying my way.
And what exactly were you doing? And how did you get inspired to do that specific thing? Had you seen people hustling on the street like that?
Well, I have to go back. The biggest career change I ever made when I was much younger was going from motion picture writer director to part-time all-night answering service operator. Did a film, and it's a long story, but it didn't get out there, and so had one of the cast members was working in an answering service and got me the job. And one of the people on the answering service was a makeup man. And because I was there alone, we'd talk, and he knew I could talk. And he says, hey, my brother invented this pipe and I'm selling them down at swap meets. Would you like to do that? And it paid more than the answering service. And it wasn't all night. So I said, sure. And, I started at swap meets, and then I bought them out. And a friend of mine, another writer I was working with, said, you have to get up at like 5 a.m. to be at these swap meets. Why don't you look at Venice Beach? There's people selling stuff out there. So I went down, and it was great. I didn't have to set up till 11. I was running into people I knew. But what happened was, when I first went out with the friend and he was demonstrating these pipes, and he did a lot, I said, you don't know, you got people coming and going, and you don't have any clue as to who's heard what. You need to cycle it. And you need to make it entertaining. And I just sort of developed the pitch. And I said, I'm going to use an old time huckster and spoof that. And make it cyclical so people stick around if they came in halfway to hear the beginning. And add jokes because I want to have fun with it. And because that'll keep a crowd. And it just sort of grew out of that.
That is beautiful. So where did you learn Huckster-Ism? Did you see it in movies, or Did you study it at all, or how do you think you learned that?
I've seen it in movies. I had friends. I'm a magician, and I had friends that actually did stuff like that. And one of them, it was working at Swap Meet, selling the mouse and the pen, and
Yeah.
talked to him and just developed it, and so I became a pitch artist. Learned how to pitch and close the sale, and have fun doing it. And also, between sets, sometimes I practice card magic and things like that. And I just had a lot of fun out there. And though I was there too long, toward the end, it wasn't fun. I started to really not want to do it. And I was glad when I gave it up. But a lot of memories, and I met a lot of wonderful people. And, it's certainly got me over any shyness.
Well, I gotta give kudos to Michael Barrow, because I totally forgot of I've really studied the performers on Venice Beach for 42 years. I can do hours and hours on the history of them, and he brought you up somehow, and I was like, "Are you kidding? That guy was the first person like that was true." And I eventually studied snake oil salesman, and the Hadacall guy was great, because he says, well, why'd you call it Hadacall? He says, I had to call it something. And he worked for 5 presidents, Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland helped sell this stuff. Okay, we're almost done here. Here's a couple more. How do you find peace of mind?
When I get there, I'll let you know.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
There's probably some serious advice I try to give me, realizing that my 12-year-old self isn't going to listen. So I think I just say, have fun.
Beautiful.
Follow what you want to do. Follow your dream. Have a good time.
It's great. Brooks, can you forget to die?
Can you forget to die? I may forget about death, but death won't forget about me.
I've had that answer. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in a couple words. Who started it all?
Who started it all? I think the first caveman and first woman looking at each other and said, there's possibilities.
Are we going to make...
You froze there. I didn't hear the question.
Are we going to make it?
I'd like to think we are. I'd like to think we're smart enough not to completely exterminate ourselves.
Where do we put it?
But the jury's still out.
The jury's still out. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Where do we put it?
In our heart.
Oh, beautiful. Who's cleaning it up?
We'll have to, our descendants, the ones that'll curse us.
Is it serious?
It's always serious, and it's never serious.
Beautiful. Yeah, back to Frank Zappa taught me, I'm very serious about being not serious. Okay, we only have a few more. This has been fun. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
Why?
Let gravity do the work.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Buy this book.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Say that again?
They want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What smell?
Boy. Chocolate.
Oh, you hit my sweet tooth. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Boy, where would it be displayed? Someplace safe from pigeons. And what would it be made of? Hopes and dreams.
Oh, you're touching me deeply in my heart. I have to add another question to this due to a guy a couple days ago. What would you be doing in the statue? It's made of hopes and dreams. What would the sculpture of you be doing?
Depending on the mood, either going,
Brooks, tell me something good you never had, but you never wanted.
something that I never had, but never wanted.
It's good you never had it, but you never want it.
I'd have to think about that one. I don't have an answer.
No worries. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd like to think I'd move my head.
Very good. What is the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
It's a double-edged sword. A generation coming up that is far more tolerant, but is also less aware.
Yeah. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Brooks, you've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I think I've answered it, but I'll repeat it. Ultimately, I'm hoping when I say goodbye that I've made it better for some.
Yeah. Beautiful. Such a great attitude. I wanted to do a bonus question here about your pursuit in education. And I'm going to read this McLuhan quote and let me know your thoughts. It's misleading to suppose there's any difference between education and entertainment. This distinction merely relieves people of the responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other pleases. However, it has always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively.
Well, we know so much about ancient peoples from their art. It teaches us so much about them. I mean, of course, if you look at Rome, we know about them from the aqueducts and things like that. We also know about them from their mosaics, their art. And I think teaching, if you can entertain someone, it's, to quote someone I very much admire, it's that spoonful of sugar helping the medicine go down.
Yes.
And Richard Sherman and his brother Robert Sherman are two brilliant people.
What is that from again? Mary Poppins?
Mary Poppins, and he got the idea from I think his son came, I think it was Richard Sherman's son came back from the polio vaccination when they did it with a sugar cube.
Oh my God, is that it?
He told the story about that was the inspiration for it. Because, I mean, you never know what's going to inspire art. And also, education's important. Remember H.G. Wells, that, history is a race between education and catastrophe. You have to have an educated, questioning population to make democracy work. And they have to be educated, not like George Carlin, I think it was George Carlin said, the educated just enough to run the machines, but not enough to think. We have to think.
Yeah.
We have to question. We have to, dive a little deeper and not just accept what the Ministry of Truth and the telescreens are spouting at us.
Yeah, I'm curious if also those Sherman guys writing Mary Poppins, if they ever read Finnegan's Wake, because you got to admit, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is a pretty Finneganese word.
Their father was a big songwriter, Al Sherman. He wrote Bananas Are Cheaper, You Got to Be a Football Hero. They're second generation brilliant songwriters.
Last question. I hope we can continue the dialogue forever and ever. Brooks, this has been truly enlightening, and I'm enlightening truly to my heart and soul and my mind. I thank you. The last question is, Brooks, what gives you the most optimism?
I think knowing history, maybe, because you see the rise and fall and so many catastrophes that we've been through, yet we always come up again.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll learn something from it at some point.
Well, that's the full circle. You brought up the circle idea, and that's a full circle. Finnegan's Wake is humans fall, then they get back up. Fall, get back up. And the interview questions are designed that way, almost like a Mobius strip. The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? And my friend studied Wilhelm Reich, and he said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And you said to be kind. So in order to be kind, you might have to have a human being there. You can be kind to animals too. But the last question is, what gives you the most optimism? This came from one of the last questions they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people. And that's funny because he spent his life cutting down other people.
Well, what is it? That every great comedian is a humanist.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, when you're laughing, you're learning. That's Bob Dobbs. And Gurdjieff said, laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. It's really been a delight. Thank you so much, Brooks. I'm going to hit the stop button, but like I said, I hope we can continue talking forever and ever.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.